Deep beneath the surface of the Earth lies a thick, dark liquid that has shaped industries, economies, and entire civilizations. It fuels transportation, powers factories, and quietly forms the backbone of countless everyday products. Yet despite its importance, the name given to it sounds surprisingly dismissive. The word crude feels almost too simple, even harsh, for something so valuable. But that name carries a meaning that goes far beyond tone or judgment, pointing instead to the very nature of the substance itself and how it exists before human hands transform it. Right here, on History of Simple Things. The word crude often carries a negative tone. It suggests something rough, unrefined, even impolite. When applied to oil, it can almost feel like an insult, as if the substance itself is somehow inferior or unfinished. But in reality, the term has nothing to do with quality in the way it might seem. Instead, it reflects a much older, more literal meaning, one rooted in the idea of something being in its natural, unprocessed state. Crude oil is called crude because it is exactly that, raw. It comes straight from the ground without having been refined or altered. In this form, it is a complex mixture of hydrocarbons, along with small amounts of sulfur, nitrogen, oxygen, and trace metals. Its appearance and consistency can vary widely depending on where it is found, ranging from light and runny to thick and almost tar-like. Regardless of these differences, what defines it is its untouched condition. The origin of the word crude traces back to the Latin word crudus, meaning raw or uncooked. Over time, this meaning carried into English, where it came to describe anything in its natural, unfinished form. Just as raw food has not yet been prepared, crude oil has not yet been processed. This idea is not unique to petroleum. Other materials are also described as crude when they still contain impurities or have not undergone refinement. Crude sugar, for example, still holds molasses within it, while crude metals are those that have been extracted but not yet purified. In every case, the word signals an early stage in a much longer process. Despite being called crude, this form of oil is anything but simple. It is made up of a wide range of hydrocarbons, from very light molecules to extremely heavy ones. These molecules behave differently under heat and pressure, which is what makes refining possible. Some crude oils are light and sweet, meaning they contain fewer impurities and are easier to process. Others are heavy and sour, filled with sulfur and thicker compounds that require more effort to refine. This variation is why not all crude oil is equal, even though all of it shares the same label. The complexity of crude oil is also what gives it value. Within that dark liquid are the building blocks for fuels like gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, as well as materials used to create plastics, synthetic fabrics, and countless chemical products. In its raw state, it may look like a single substance, but it is actually a dense mixture of potential. The journey from crude oil to usable products begins in a refinery. Here, the oil is heated and separated into different components through a process called distillation. Each component has a different boiling point, allowing it to be isolated and further processed. Lighter fractions rise to the top and become fuels like gasoline, while heavier fractions settle lower and are used for diesel, lubricants, or even asphalt. Additional processes such as cracking and reforming break down or rearrange molecules to create more useful products. This transformation is what turns crude oil into something functional. Without refining, crude oil has very limited direct use. It is the processing that unlocks its full potential, turning a raw resource into a wide array of essential materials. Even after understanding its meaning, the word crude can still feel misleading. It suggests something basic or lacking value, when in fact crude oil is one of the most important resources in the modern world. But the name has endured because it accurately describes a specific stage in the oil's life cycle. The term serves as a distinction between what comes out of the ground and what comes out of a refinery. It marks the boundary between nature and human intervention, between raw material and finished product. In that sense, crude is not an insult but a classification. Language often preserves older meanings even as perceptions change. What once simply meant raw has taken on new connotations over time, but in the context of oil, the original definition remains intact. Not all crude oil is the same. It is often classified by density and sulfur content. Lighter oils called light flow more easily, while heavier oils are thicker and harder to process. Crude with low sulfur is sweet, and oil with high sulfur is sour, which requires extra refining. These distinctions show that even in its raw form, crude oil is evaluated and understood in detail. The word crude may sound simple, but it actually covers a wide range of types, each with its own characteristics and uses. In the end, the term crude oil is less about criticism and more about origin. It reflects a stage in a much larger journey, from raw material hidden deep underground to the refined products that shape modern life. What may seem rough and unpolished is actually the starting point of a complex transformation that turns a single substance into fuels, materials, and chemicals used every day. The word crude serves as a reminder that before refinement and precision, there is a natural beginning. It doesn't suggest a lack of value. It simply describes a state before processing. In that sense, crude oil is not incomplete but full of potential, forming the foundation for the systems and technologies that define the modern world. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.